All right. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Had to get my sharing done. Hello. Good evening. Happy Wednesday. Hey, everybody. Hey, my sister, Linda. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Thank you for joining me tonight. Hello to everybody. Welcome to the Self Checkout Show. I am your host, Pastor Will. It's good to be on with you all tonight. Um, We're going to come on and talk about what we're talking about tonight, and we are going to get on off of here and have a nice evening. We had some pleasant weather today, so that was good, but it'll be back cold within the next day or two, so we got to prepare for that. They're talking about 20s and 30s. Right, it's that time of year. It is that time of year. Good evening, my little sister Toya. How are you? So glad to see you on tonight. Yep, but we are definitely gearing up for winter time. And I've been in Chicago my whole life, but I'm never ready for winter. I'm just not. I just don't like it, y'all. Just to be to be quite honest with you. But if I can get everybody to share this broadcast tonight, we're going to talk about something that's very, very, very important. Um, Tonight, and I think that it will really, really help somebody. And that's the goal of the Self Checkout Show. This is the show where we take an honest look at what's in our hearts, minds, and spirits, and um, that is the goal of this avenue of ministry, to be able to take what's being heard and saying to ourselves, is this me? And if so, if there is something to be taken from it that will enrich my life, then by all means, give it to me. Because day by day, we should want to be better people. And sometimes it's just some stuff that we have lingering in us that some of it is bad, of course, that we need to get out of us, and some of it is good. And when I first started this show, I likened it unto, being in the grocery store and you have a cart or the little basket, either one, and you putting stuff in your cart. And I say, oh, this looks good. This looks good. Then when you get to the self checkout, whether it be self checkout or you go to a regular checkout lane, you're looking in your basket and like, why did I put this in here? I know I don't need this, you know, and you take it out or you, whatever the case may be. My point is there are some things that we have allowed to get in us that is not necessarily good for us to have. And we must do our due diligence to make sure that those things come out of us. There's a song that we used to sing long ago. Song said, if you find anything that's not like you, I ask you, Lord, because you know what to do. The song says, uh, take it away from me. And that is our goal and that is our prayer for those things. But not everything is in us is bad, right? We got some good stuff in us, like the fruit of the spirit, the joy, the peace, the long suffering, the temperance, all those other 9 characteristics. But yes, we are in our series, and this is part 3. I will not delay because I don't plan on taking up the whole hour tonight because I don't think it's necessary. We're just going to say what we're going to say. The first week of this series, we started talking about I got issues. And the first part was who, me, where we discussed coming to grips with the fact that it is, in fact, us that has issues sometimes, and being okay with acknowledging that we have issues and then making the move to do something about those issues. And then part 2, we discussed on last week, which was really, really amazing. Part 2 was real good. Um, Who is okay? I'm sorry, y'all. Um, Part two, we talked about triggers. And do you not know? I had to go back and watch my own show on. I had to go back and watch it. I said I got to see what was said. I got to see what I said because being in ministry and being a minister, you have to understand that when you do minister, those things will oftentimes try you before or after you minister something. So I had to go back and take a look at it myself. Like, wow, okay, we did say that. And tonight, we will continue in this series, I Got Issues, and we're talking about leading while leaking. Leading while leaking. And our base scripture, again, for this entire series comes from Matthew chapter 9. I'm going to use Matthew chapter 9, verses 20, 21, and 22. And it says in the King James Version, and behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind Jesus and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour. The verse 20 says, and behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue. Hey, mama, good evening, with an issue of blood. She had an issue. I got issues. And that's what we're talking about this month. I got issues. This woman had what is described as an issue of blood for 12 years. In other words, it was her menstrual cycle that typically, I had to look it up, that typically lasts 5 to 7 days, they say. And it is the monthly cleansing process that a woman goes through as she prepares some for possible pregnancy. But it normally takes place, they say, roughly 5 days or so. And the body goes through that cycle and it stops until the next cycle. But this woman did not have a stoppage in her cycle. She was leaking for 12 full years. I know of some women who get really moody, cranky. They are in pain. Some are when they experience this monthly cycle. A lot of different emotions and things of that nature. And that's just for a week, 5 days to a week. They experience this change in their bodies where they are leaking blood for this period of time. And again, I said this when we opened up our series, that during biblical times, a woman was pretty much forbidden from coming outside during this time of the month for her, for she was considered to be unclean during her cycle. Once it ended, she was able to come outside because she was no longer considered to be unclean. So now we have this woman who has been leaking for 12 years, and in the book of John, I believe, or Luke, gave a more descriptive account of this particular story. And it says that she had spent all she had running from doctor to doctor, trying to be healed of her leakage, but no doctor could heal her or prescribe her anything to stop the leakage. So she went for 12 years. Everywhere she went, she was leaking. Everybody she was around, she was leaking. Now, mind you, this for women is a natural bodily function that occurs monthly. So these women expect for this to happen. I believe it is until they reach a certain age where menopause kicks in. That's a whole nother story. But this woman leaking 12 long years. And I want to take that tonight and look at a couple of things, and I will tie it all up to what we're talking about tonight. I want to take a look at something that happens with the loss of a lot of blood. Once you have experienced blood volume loss of more than 40%, that's when doctors say your condition is critical. You are in critical condition if you lose 40% or more of your blood volume. Your pulse becomes really low and faint. Your heart will beat more faster. They say it'll beat at more than 120 beats per minute. If you've lost this much blood, you could experience extremely rapid or shallow breathing, rapid heart rate, confusion, weakness, weak pulse, blue lips, fingertips, lightheadedness, and sometimes you may even lose consciousness. Your mental status will obviously be abnormal, and you may experience external, because these women are already bleeding externally, but you may also experience internal bleeding from areas of your body. Now, when fluid loss occurs excessively as a result of severe blood loss, a more specific term is used to describe the condition. This is called hemorrhage shock. Now, depending on the location of the bleeding, and I'm going somewhere, depending on the location of the bleeding inside the body, the symptoms and signs may include abdominal pain, blood in the stool, blood in urine, vomiting blood, chest pain, abdominal swelling. This is from hemorrhaging, internal bleeding. And at this point, you should have already gone to see a doctor. Because if you do not, the next step in this phase is called when your body goes into shock, because you are constantly leaking and losing fluids, losing blood from your body. Okay? And then your mental state now becomes, good evening, my brother, Pastor Greg. Your mental state now becomes even more diluted, and you become more confused, because what's happening on the inside of you and what is leaking from you affects not just your physical, but it also affects your mental and your emotional state. So our subject tonight, leading while leaking, is important because we have leaders of whatever type, whatever kind, whether it be in ministry or in the marketplace. We have leaders that have experienced trauma to their mental psyche, to not even physical, but we have leaders that have experienced trauma to their mental and to their emotional states. Pastor Greg says this information changes my perspective of that passage. Yeah, it was kind of deep for me too when I read what it really, really entails. I'm a man. I have no need to read up on menstrual cycles, but for the sake of this lesson, I had to see what a body goes through when there is excessive leakage. So here we are, leaders, people who, let's just talk about the church right now. People who are apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, ministry leaders, choir leaders, musicians, deacons, ushers, whatever you want to look at a leader in the church. People have experienced trauma in their lives that have affected them mentally and emotionally and have caused internal bleeding. Internal bleeding. When trauma happens to us and we act as if everything is okay. Oh, we can brush it off. We can deal with it. But the smallest trauma could cause internal bleeding. Even the smallest vessel could burst and you begin to bleed. You begin to leak on the inside. Now, I do want to say this, that eventually what's in you, the results of the trauma that you have experienced is in you. And if you don't address it, you begin to hemorrhage internally. And we try to go on as if everything is okay. And we try to continue to operate in whatever facet of ministry that we are operating in without acknowledging that we have received some type of trauma that have messed us up emotionally and mentally. I want to look at something, 2 Timothy chapter 4 in the NIV, verse number 9, 9 through, I'm going to read it quickly, 9 through 14, 9 through 15. It says, the Apostle Paul says, do your best to come to me quickly. For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. He says, get Mark and bring him with you because he's helpful to me in my ministry. Verse 14 says, Alexander, the metal worker, did me a great deal of harm. The Lord will repay him for what he's done. You too should be on guard against him because he strongly opposed our message. I'll read one more verse. Verse 16, it says, at my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. That is 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 through 16. I skipped around a little bit. The Apostle Paul said that he too had experienced trauma because the people that said that they would always be there, they deserted him. They left him and then began to oppose everything that he was saying, everything that he was teaching. Not even so much it's the opposition that I want to mention. I do want to mention the fact that the Apostle Paul felt deserted. Do you know what kind of trauma that causes when he or she said that they would never leave you, and out of nowhere, they're gone? But you have to carry on as if everything's okay. Why? Because you got people watching you. You have people looking up to you. You have people who believe in you. And you have people who are waiting for you to fail also. That's true. The Apostle Paul said that these, my brothers, my family, they deserted me. They left me all by myself. I have nobody. I have no support, he says. The trauma that is experienced from desertion will leave you hemorrhaging, leaking internally. But the apostle he said at the end, if you keep reading that, he said, I don't want to charge it to them though. He said, I'll just chalk it up for whatever it is. I won't hold it against them. But he had to carry on with his assignment. And so my question tonight is, what do we do when we have been dealt severe trauma and we have to carry on because we have an assignment? Oh boy. How do we deal with the internal bleeding that we have, and we've been deserted, we've been lied to, we've been lied on, we've been hey Denise, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Pastor Greg says, how many leaders have been deserted and now have to live with only 40%? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. How do we deal with, as leaders, how do we deal with the trauma? Pastor Murph is on. Hey, overseer. How do we deal with the lies? I'm a leader. We're leaders. How do we deal with the lies that people tell from people that, like the Apostle Paul said in 2 Timothy 4, that were close to us? Brenda, good evening. Hello, I see you. Thank you for tuning in tonight. How do we go on with our assignment and we are hemorrhaging? We are bleeding internally from trauma, the trauma of being abandoned, the trauma of dealing with the people, like I said a minute ago, who swore they would never leave you. How do we deal with the trauma of if you're married, even of being cheated on? Come on, say something. I got a special show coming up on Wednesday, December 1st. We're going to deal with that. How do you deal with the trauma of being of people leaving your church, leaving your life, leaving your ministry? How do you deal with the trauma of being deserted by the one that they said they would never desert you? How do you deal with the emotional and mental trauma? How do you deal with it when I'm a single parent now? I was married, but now I'm single. I'm a parent. I have to raise these children by myself, and I want to give up. How do you deal with the trauma and the internal bleeding that is caused by decisions that somebody else made? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with backstabbing friends? Come on. This causes trauma. This causes internal bleeding. How do you deal with this? Many people, they do not deal with it at all. They just go on as if nothing has happened. Hey, Jen, good to see you. Good to see you, Dr. Kermita. Good to see you. Dr. Kermita says most don't deal with it. They just tolerate it. Exactly what I just said. They don't deal with it. They just tolerate it, and they are bleeding internally from being dealt such a trauma. But here is the problem. Because when you have not dealt with your trauma, especially when you are a leader, do you not know you end up leaking on everybody else that you come in contact with? Pastor Greg says, how do you deal with them leaving you for the thing you're trying to save others from? Come on, that's what I'm talking about. Come on. If it is not dealt with, you end up leaking on everybody else that you come in contact with. Let me bring it a little bit closer. If you do not deal with the past, let's say, I'll use this one because I'm going to talk about it in a couple of weeks. If you don't deal with the past infidelities, if you've ever been cheated on, if you do not deal with that, you will end up leaking on the next man or the next woman because you did not take the time to heal from the last trauma. Internally, bleeding. And so what's in you, because you didn't deal with it, it eventually comes out of you and you end up leaking on the next man, making him, young lady, making him pay for what the last man did. Leaking and leading. We have leaders that have not dealt with themselves from younger years and grow up and move on to have children and spouses. And then the thing that they never dealt with from when they were a teenager emerges some 20, 30 years later. And now you're leaking over your spouse and over your children, creating a mess of your family because we never dealt with the internal bleeding. It's not easy. It's already not easy to be a leader. I don't care what nobody say. That's not easy, y'all. It's not easy to sit in a seat of leadership because when you do, you already have extra eyes watching you everywhere you go. Everything you do, they are watching and they are waiting for you to fall, for you to make a mistake. Overseer Murph says, or you end up doing the same thing that was done to you. Bingo. Bingo. It creates a pattern within you. You end up, they say that a person who was molested as a child, 9 times out of 10 will end up molesting a child. What Pastor Marti says, you end up doing the same thing that was done to you. This is why it's important. I was just using it as an example. This is why it's important to deal with your internal issues, especially if you are a leader. The trauma of divorce, that is a traumatic experience, but it has to be dealt with. You have to deal with you about that before you go and jump into another relationship. That needs to be, it don't even have to be divorce. It could be just a, non-marital relationship, a regular romantic relationship that ends. If it ends, that's traumatic. And you need to deal with it before you move on to the next person. And if you are a pastor, a minister, a apostle, whatever, those titles don't exempt us from having issues. Those titles do not prevent us from being from bleeding internally. Those titles do not keep us from experiencing trauma. But what happens when you have to lead people and you don't know in your personal life which way to go? Come on, talk to me right now. Talk to me right now. Glenda is on. She says this is so true. Most don't take the time to heal, taking toxicity immediately to the next relationship. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We don't take time to heal from whatever trauma has been dealt to us. And the next person or the next people will pay for it. If pastors, senior pastors, if you do not heal, do you not know that what's in you, that internal bleeding in you, will eventually spew out on your membership? You may not even recognize it. You may not even recognize it, but what's in you is coming out of you, and the people that's around us can recognize it, and they are the ones who are the recipients of what's coming out of you because you did not deal with yourself. Pastor Greg says, and that's the problem. We don't like to confront the you in us that's living with the residue of pain. We do not. That's a true statement. We don't like to confront that. And I think, Pastor Greg, is because we feel that, oh, I'll be okay. I'm gonna be all right. I'm a big boy. I can take it. I'm good. And we've become so accustomed, especially leaders, we've become so accustomed to giving that response. I'm good. I'm good. When the truth of the matter is, we're absolutely not good. We're messed up emotionally, mentally. We're messed up and we're leaking everywhere we go. And you think that people do not recognize that you are messed up. There is somebody right now in my life who I know has experienced a lot of trauma. Lot. And they appear to me to be doing everything that they possibly can to make themselves appear to be normal. And I just want to take them and sit them down and say, hey, you need to chill. You need to not preach, not sing, not get in another bed. Come on, somebody. You need to not do nothing for a minute until you heal, because that's what we do. Especially if you're in ministry, we just try to get the next engagement or get the next microphone or just do something on social media to try to make us appear to be okay. But people that have discernment and people that know you know that you are not okay. Glenda says we truly should address, deal with hurt from, so that we don't carry that pain elsewhere. Hence the term hurt people. You know, I think that is the basis of what we're talking about tonight too, Glenda, because when we have in fact been hurt, a couple of things could occur. We do, number one, I agree with that statement, Glenda. We do hurt people, do hurt other people. And probably 100% of the time is because we may want the next person to hurt as bad as we hurt. But we also have to keep in mind that the next person is not the person that hurt you. So why do we leak on that person when they ain't even done nothing? But it may be something chemically in us that just lashes out because we were done wrong. So we want to do somebody else wrong. We just want somebody to feel the pain that we feel. So we leak. We're leaking on other people who have done nothing wrong to us. Thus is why we need to sit ourselves down and heal from the trauma. Pastor Greg says we have to redefine what true healing is. Healing is not covering it up, not mentioning it, and thinking if we don't say it, we're healed from it. Healing is becoming whole from the pain and the wound. That's it. Healing is becoming whole, a whole person all over again, because trauma takes a bit from you. It does, in fact, take a bit from you. So we have to take some time to settle ourselves, because listen, when you've been dealt bad trauma, the last thing you need to do is to keep busy. No, you need to pull back some. You need to sit down for a minute. You need to sit down and evaluate yourself. Self-checkout. You need to sit down and evaluate yourself, because if we are leaders, the last thing we should want to do is to have people that we are leading paying for our trauma. Okay? The last thing we should want to do is be leaking all. This is why I believe that in the Bible days, when the women would have their monthly menstrual cycle, they could not go out and about amongst people. They were declared unclean until that cycle ended. What about us today? What about us who are in cycles of hatred? We're in cycles of envy, cycles of jealousy, but yet we're going around people and we are considered unclean and we're leaking all over the place. We got to deal with this stuff. You cannot effectively lead people and you are leaking pain, you're leaking envy, you're leaking strife, you're leaking hurt. And there are some of you who have really been hurt. Really been hurt. Really been hurt. But we have to carry on because we have an assignment. Yeah. We do have an assignment. But what's wrong with pulling back? I'm not saying abort the mission. I'm not saying that. But I am saying what's wrong with taking a few steps back and saying, I need not to deal with the assignment right now. I need to deal with my heart right now. Come on. I need to deal with my heart. Because let me tell you about me. I am the type of person I never, ever want to intentionally hurt anybody. That's just me. That's just how I am. I've been like that my whole life. If I hurt you, I will beat myself up because I don't like to hurt nobody. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to hurt nobody. And sometimes we can hurt people unintentionally, not knowing that we have hurt them, not knowing that we have leaked on them, because, Lord Glenda said, we've been hurt before and never dealt with it. So now, even though you may not know, because that's possible, you may not know that you hurt them. You are just merely reacting to a situation, and there's a wall that you have up that you are trying to keep from experiencing that trauma all over again. But I declare to you tonight that if you deal with the leakage in your life, you know, it's a funny thing how we have a tendency to always see the trauma in somebody else's life, but never our own. That's an amazing thing. It tickles me how we can we can point the finger at everybody else and know that there's something wrong with this person. This person needs to do this. This person needs to do that. Well, let's turn that back around on us. Have you dealt with your own trauma? Come on. Let's go back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, Psalms 51. The psalmist David said, I acknowledge my transgression and my sin is ever before me. Create in me, come on, a clean heart, oh God, and renew in me. He talked about himself. He wasn't talking about nobody else. He wasn't pointing out anybody else's trauma. He wasn't pointing out anybody else's internal bleeding. He saw it within himself. It took a prophet to show it to him, but when the prophet showed it to him, he acknowledged that he was messed up and he did not want to continue leaking on other people. It was him not dealing with his own trauma that caused him, David, to have Bathsheba's husband killed. Because he didn't deal with the leakage from infidelity. Come on. So we have to take some time out and say, you know what? I don't even need to preach today. I'm talking to church people right now. I don't need to preach today. I don't need to sing today. I don't need to play. I don't need to direct. I don't need to usher. I don't need to do none of that because I need to deal with my trauma. And if I'm an usher and I haven't dealt with my trauma, I may have an attitude at the door of the house of God when I'm supposed to greet people with kindness and with hospitality. I may be mad. I don't care where you sit. Go on, sit anywhere. We have to deal with what's in us. If you do not deal with it, listen, if you don't deal with that internal bleeding, you do know physically a person that's hemorrhaging, if they don't get to a hospital and have surgery so that the surgeon could stop that bleeding, they will die. This woman who had the issue of blood 12 years, it's only a miracle in itself that she was able after 12 years to get to Jesus, to be healed of her bleeding. How long have you been bleeding and have not dealt with it? How long? How long have we allowed our past traumas? How long have we allowed them to live in us without dealing with them? How long are we going to allow our own insecurities to ruin everything we have around us? You have to deal with it. I don't care how good you preach. I don't care how good you do whatever it is you do. If there is trauma, you need to deal with that trauma lest you die spiritually, lest your relationships die. I'm telling you, you have the potential to kill a relationship, a covenant relationship, if you do not deal with your issues, if you don't deal with your internal bleeding. Nobody wants to be leaked on all the time just because you won't deal with your issue. You know what they'll do? They'll find somebody else that's whole already. They'll move on to somebody else that's whole, whether that be another church. Come on, because I'm not going to take no spiritual abuse from you either. Whether it be another relationship, they don't need to be recipients of you not dealing with yourself. So now you're going to make them suffer. You're going to make them pay because you didn't deal with your own stuff. Leading while leaking. It's a hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do, but I want to encourage you that are watching, you that will watch the replay, examine yourself. Take a look at your relationships. Has anybody said anything to you? And if, let me tell you something, you better thank God for the one or the ones that say to you, hey, you need to deal with that. Because people, let me tell you something. People that love you and love you for real will tell you You're leaking on me, and I did not deserve this. You need to deal with your issues. Can we just talk for real tonight? And you can't get no attitude when they come to you and say, hey, you bleeding. If somebody tells you, walks up to you and say, what's you bleeding? What's wrong? You may not even know. Has that ever happened to you? Maybe brother nicked yourself shaving a little bit and you didn't know it was still bleeding and you done went about your day. And somebody look at you, hey, you're bleeding right there. You didn't even know you were bleeding. You didn't know you were leaking until somebody pointed it out to you. That was a good one right there. Yeah, that was good. Sometimes it takes someone close to you that you are in covenant relationship with to say, Greg, you're leaking. Martise, do you not know you bleeding? Glenda, you got some leakage going on there. Come on. It takes somebody who's close to us, who loves us enough to say, hey, you need to deal with that. You need to deal with that. Because you are hurting me by not dealing with you. Woo! Can I say that again? You're hurting me by not dealing with you. If you are in ministry, I want you and me, I want us to deal with our trauma, deal with our issues, deal with our internal bleeding. We need to deal with it because people are waiting. There are people waiting for what you have to say. There are people's healings and deliverances and breakthroughs that lie in your mouth, but you're spewing out what you feel from your trauma that you haven't dealt with. So now you got people's blessings on hold because you won't deal with you. Now you have people's deliverance on hold because you won't deal with your own trauma. But I say to you tonight, as Jesus said, come unto me. That's what he said. And he's saying that to us tonight. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Cast your care on him. Give him your trauma. Give him your leakage. Give it to Jesus Christ, because he and he alone is the one that is able to heal us from broken heart, from whatever internal bleeding we have. He alone is able to heal us. Another sex partner won't do that for you. I'm sorry. You don't need another bed to lay in. That's not where your healing is. You don't need that. You need to be made whole. And if you just jump in another bed, that's not making you whole. That's actually taking another piece of you. Come on. Soul ties. So sex ain't the answer to this. You need to be whole. You need to be healed. You need to be healed. Pastor Greg says, and I'm getting off here. I did not mean to take this much time. Pastor Greg says, and in the case of the woman with the issue of blood, she went to people who practiced on her pain solutions that only made her worse. Like you said, we need people who see us bleeding and can help stop it. If they can't help stop it, they can at least point it out to you and say, hey, sir, you're bleeding. Go and see somebody about that. And we have to be proactive in our own healing. We have to be proactive in getting ourselves to be whole again. And I want you to know that you can be whole again. You can be whole again. This is good, Glenda says. I just had a situation with someone, and because of previous trauma, leakage, it caused her to be delusional and see or feel something that wasn't even facts. And because I love her and have to put in work on me, I had to address it because I can't allow anyone to reopen the scars that I've worked towards healing. That's good, Glenda. That's good. That's good. because of previous leakage. It caused the young lady to be delusional and see or feel something that wasn't even facts. One of the symptoms of when your body has lost 40% of blood volume or more is delusion. It's science. It's science. You become delusional and begin to do like that and see something that does not even exist. When you have not dealt with your issues, you think everybody out to get you. My. You think everybody's against you when you haven't dealt with your issues. But tonight, I say to you that the Lord wants to make you whole. He wants to make us whole. I've had to deal with it too. I've had to deal with it recently. I've had to deal with it, Glenda, too. Somebody that cares about me. Listen, Greg, yep, delusional. Yeah. Somebody that cares about me enough said to me, hey, you're leaking. You need to deal with that. And I had to stop and say, well, doggone it. I looked at the situation. I said, well, okay. And I thought about, you have to let your mind go back, because sometimes, and I'm a firm believer in this. This is not just called self-checkout for no reason. I'm a firm believer in it. You have to go back and look at your life and find out where the bleeding came from. Find out where the trauma is. And then once you find that out, you address it. And it's got to be by prayer. And again, y'all know I'm a firm believer of therapy and counseling. It's got to be by prayer, therapy, counseling, whatever. But if you love somebody enough, pastors, if you love your members enough, spouses, if you love your spouse enough, parents, if you love your children enough, children, if you love your parents enough, friends, if you love your friends enough, and they point out to you, hey, you're leaking on me. I didn't deserve that. Don't become full of pride and don't deny it. Acknowledge it, apologize, and seek help for it. Because if you don't, you will lose a relationship, whatever type of relationship that is, and you'll end up leaking on the next person who's done nothing to you, because you won't deal with the leakage that was caused from the last trauma. This is good stuff tonight. This is good stuff tonight. The woman had an issue of blood for 12 years. 12 years. She was leaking everywhere she went. People didn't want to be involved with her. People didn't want to be around her. People didn't want to deal with her unclean self. So what makes us think people want to be involved with us when all we're doing is leaking all over them? My goodness. There are people who have mercy on us, who love us for real, that'll say, I'm willing to work it out with you if you just deal with your issues. Last comment, Glenda says, I was about to say that, and it should be a continual thing, therapy, prayer, etc. Some have been leaking long before they even realized it. So yes. Been leaking long before you even knew it. Long before you even knew it. Pastor Greg, I will not lie to you. There are no notes. All I got is scripture. And I looked up a couple of things on menstrual cycles. I don't have no notes. We're just talking tonight. But yeah, man, this was amazing. And next week we will end the series next Wednesday night. I wasn't going to do a show, but I said, yes, I'm coming on because it is the day before Thanksgiving. And that night, from the lessons that we have had this month, we are going to come on and just thank God together. Next Wednesday night, we're going to thank God for our healing. That's what we're going to do together next week. So I want you all to come back next Wednesday night. And as we prepare to leave tonight, the Apostle Paul, 2 Timothy chapter 4 in the New International Version, he mentioned a number of people that he had been in relationship with, that he had been in ministry with, who traveled with him, who, in my phrase, my own term, said, I'll be with you. And he said in around verse number 9, they left me. They deserted me. They left me alone. Matthew chapter 9, the woman that had the issue of blood, she was determined to be healed after she tried everything else. She said, Jesus is here. Let me try him. And she touched but the hem of his garment and was made whole immediately. She was. The psalmist David, he would not eat. He would not bathe. He would just pray in sackcloth and ashes because his son was sick unto death. And he prayed and prayed and prayed. And his son eventually died as a result of David's own leakage. His son died. There's so many others I could mention to you tonight, but I want you to think on this tonight. Think on these things. Everybody was not meant to stay with you forever. So you have to kind of mentally prepare. I'm not saying be paranoid, but you have to mentally prepare for some people to eventually fall off. The higher you go, everybody can't go with you. So don't allow that to traumatize you to the point where you bleed, where you leak on people. Prepare for that. But you do need to take a step back sometimes and examine yourself. Take a look at yourself and say, am I bleeding anywhere? Am I okay? Look in the mirror and look at yourself and say, am I bleeding anywhere? Because I don't want to be a hindrance to the next person because I'm bleeding and don't know I'm bleeding. And many do know that they are bleeding, but they carry on as if everything is normal. Well, everything is not normal. I want you to care about yourself. I want you to care about the next person enough that you are not willing to allow them to die because you won't get healed. Brothers and sisters, there are people who are waiting for what you have. Take care of your trauma. Take care of your trauma. Allow yourself to not just be healed, but to be whole again. Not just healed, but whole. So I thank you all for coming on the Self-Checkout Show tonight. We'll be back next Wednesday night as we talk about thanking God for our healing. And then we have a special panel on Wednesday night, December 1st. I said I wasn't going to do any shows in December, but I've gotten a large response about dealing with the PTSD that comes from cheating. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. So I love you guys. I will see you all next Wednesday night. And do not forget, you don't want to just be healed. You want to be whole. because you do not want to be leading while leaking. All right. I love you guys. I'll see you guys next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Take care, everybody.